I did something crazy. I asked Google's AI what XRP might be worth if a kind of wild scenario came true. And the answer nearly made me spill my coffee. Seriously, right? This might just be one of the XRP moon predictions that isn't just pure hopium. There's actual math sitting behind it. Now, in fact, this whole journey started with a question from someone on our Discord community. They basically asked, hey, can XRP ever realistically hit $50 or $100? Or is that all just crypto fantasy land? Honestly, my knee-jerk was to kind of chuckle, but the gears started turning. Instead of just saying, nah, that's crazy, I decided to actually investigate one plausible path that could take XRP to those heights. And I'm not going to share, at least I am going to share that journey with you guys, and I'm not going to lie, it's a crazy one. So consider this your invitation to view me on a little adventure, right? We're about to piece together how something as tangible as real estate or stocks could tie into XRP's future. Now, I'm not here to just hype things up. I'm here to explore the idea that just might surprise you and make you think twice. By the end of this story, you're going to know how an XRP at $64 could actually happen on paper, and whether I'm crazy for even entertaining it. Now, have you ever heard the term tokenized real-world assets? It's a bit of a mouthful, I know, but the idea is pretty cool, right? Take something from the real world, like a piece of real estate or a share of stock, or even government bond, and represent it as a token on the blockchain. So think of it like a poker chip that represents cash at a casino, right? A token can represent ownership of a real asset, and you can trade it as easily as crypto 24/7 globally. Now, according to a report by Ripple, they believe that this tokenization of assets is going to be massive over the next decade. Right? They threw out a huge number of nearly $19 trillion that could be tokenized by 2033. And yes, that was trillion with a T. Now that number blew my mind. It's kind of like an ocean of value potentially moving onto blockchains. Now of that, they expect tokenized real world, at least real estate, could be around 3.7 trillion, and tokenized equities another 2 trillion. So basically, a big chunk of the world's property and stocks might live on-chain by then. Now, as an XRP holder, hearing that, my ears of course perked up, right? If that much value is coming on-chain, which blockchains are going to host it? Because whichever ones do could see a whole lot of action and value. Now, Ripple obviously hopes that the XRP ledger, known as the XRPL, will be the one main platform, right? Now, today, the reality is much smaller than that, right? In fact, I looked up the current numbers. All tokenized assets on all blockchains today add up to around $26.5 billion. Not trillion, but billion. So, we're still at the very starting line here then, right? But it is growing slowly. That figure was a little bit lower last month, so it is trending up steadily. Now, out of that $26 billion, shall we say, guess how much of it is actually on the XRP ledger? About $302 million. Yeah, so there's a few hundred million, which is roughly 1.14% of the total. Now that kind of places the XRPL around 9th place among all blockchains for tokenized assets. 9th place isn't exactly a gold medal, but hey, at least XRPL is in the race. It's on the scoreboard. So, XRPL is a kind of minor player right now, but it's got something going for it that could make it the dark horse. So why would anyone choose the XRPL for tokenizing assets instead of, let's say, Ethereum, which is currently the king of tokenization? Well, Ripple and the XRPL fans will tell you that it's because XRPL is practically built just for this stuff, right? For one, right, you can issue tokens on the XRPL really easily. There's no need to write complex smart contract code. And on Ethereum, of course, if you want to tokenize an asset, you'd likely create a custom contract, ERC-20, ERC-721, whatever, right? Which is kind of requiring code, audits, and introduces kind of risks, right? Now on the XRPL, you can basically fill out a few parameters and, issue a token natively. This is the difference between hand coding a website from scratch versus using a simple website builder. And once your token is on the XRPL, it's instantly tradable on XRPL's built-in decentralized exchange. And yeah, XRPL has a DEX baked right into it. Not everyone seems to know that. It's kind of been there for years. Well, plus XRPL has a neat little trick called auto bridging, which basically means that if you want to trade one asset for another and there isn't a direct market, the system will bridge through XRP automatically to facilitate the trade. It's kind of like having a universal translator for value on the ledger, making sure that liquidity is not fractured. So, the big picture. XRPL, it's fast, it's cheap to use, no high gas fees, and it's user-friendly for tokenization. Now, some analysts believe that because of these design features, XRPL has the potential to capture as much, or at least a much larger share of the tokenized asset market in the coming years. Now, it's not just me being a fan here. There are people who study this stuff saying, hey, XRPL has the right ingredients to grab a bigger piece of the pie. Now, let's talk about XRP's price for just a second here, because all of this does tie together. Right now, XRP is around $3.14 a coin, and there are about 59.3 billion XRP in circulation. So that gives it a market cap of roughly around, $187 billion, give or take. Some people suggest that even at $3, XRP might be undervalued considering the kind of tech and efficiency that XRPL offers. They argue that because XRPL can do all of this fancy tokenization and fast transactions, then maybe the market hasn't fully priced that in just yet. But, the market's the final judge here, and right now it prices XRP at around $3 and some change. So that's the baseline that we're going to be starting from then. Alright, so we've set the stage then. There's a huge future potential here for tokenization. XRPL with a small but promising foothold, and XRP price hovering in a single-digit level. Now comes the fun part, the what if. So, what if by 2033, the XRP ledger really kind of steps up and grabs 10% of that projected $19 trillion tokenized asset market? 10% of 19 trillion is $1.9 trillion. Just picture $1.9 trillion worth of real estate, stocks, bonds, whatever, all tokenized and running on XRPL. Now that alone is such a crazy scenario that it's actually worth repeating. $1.9 trillion of real-world assets on one blockchain. So, for perspective here, $1.9 trillion is like the GDP of a country like Canada or Italy, just chilling on the XRPL. Now, it's an absolutely colossal amount, an ocean of assets, right? If that ever happened, it would mean that the XRPL has gone from holding $300 million worth to $1.9 trillion in value. That's not just growth, that's kind of like strapping a rocket to the XRPL. So naturally, if the XRPL did that, you would think that XRP, that's the coin that would have to be worth a lot more, right? Well, I mean XRP is the native token of the XRP ledger, used for fees, for liquidity, and as a kind of bridge currency. If the XRPL is hosting that kind of value, demand for XRP should be through the roof, at least in theory. Now, I wanted to figure out how high XRP might go in that scenario. Instead of me just guessing, I enlisted some help from Google's new AI model, Gemini. And it's basically Google's answer to ChatGPT, a powerful AI that can analyze and calculate stuff. Now, I asked Google Gemini to assess what XRP's price might be if XRPL controlled 10% of that $19 trillion market by 2033. Now, the AI, it came back with two scenarios, right, which I'm going to call Model 1 and Model 2. Now, Model 1 is the straightforward scenario. Gemini assumes a direct relationship between the value of the assets on the XRPL and XRP's market cap. In plain English, it's treating $1.9 trillion of assets on the XRPL as translating to $1.9 trillion of market cap for XRP. Sort of like that. If you build it, the value will come 1 to 1. Now, under that rather basic model, with roughly 59.3 billion XRP out there, right, that's kind of calculated a price to be around $32 per XRP. To be exact, it said $32.04, but hey, we can just round it to $32. Now, when I saw that, my jaw almost dropped. $32 for one XRP coin. That's roughly 10 times the current price. Now, for context, XRP's all-time high was around the kind of $3.80 back in the crazy old bull run of 2018. And it got close to that again, back here just a few months ago. Now we've seen, double-digit XRP predictions, or we've seen plenty of predictions, but we've never actually seen a double-digit XRP before. So $32 would be kind of breaking totally new ground. Now, if you've held XRP for years, dreaming of $10, just imagine $32. Now, I have to note here, even the AI flagged that scenario is highly improbable. And I'm with the AI on that one, right? Not impossible, but certainly a stretch given what we know now. $1.9 trillion market cap for XRP would mean XRP alone would be, by far, the most valuable crypto asset in the world. Unless, of course, by then other coins also move similarly, which is vastly possible. It would potentially go after Bitcoin's market cap, right? And imply a level of adoption and utility for XRP way beyond what we have currently seen. So Model 1 is kind of like our optimistic but still somewhat grounded scenario then. Model 2, now here is where things go from optimistic to borderline, I guess, fantastical. In the second model, Gemini assumed that if the XRPL is successful, right, 10% of the world's tokenized assets, XRP might get an extra boost from speculation, network effect, as well. Basically, people would not just value XRP based on its assets on the XRPL, but also add in premiums because of the XRP's kind of pivotal role and future potential. So in numbers, instead of a kind of $1.9 trillion market cap, maybe XRP goes to something like $3.8 trillion in market cap in this hype-fueled scenario. $3.8 trillion. Now I know, it sounds bonkers, right? That's like Apple and Microsoft combined. Maybe something like I said earlier, the GDP of a G7 country. Now, if that happened, right, the AI said that we would be looking at around $64 per XRP coin. And yes, 64 bucks. Even writing that feels kind of surreal. Now, when I heard $64, I had to laugh out loud. Not because it sounded funny or anything, but because it was such a have I gone insane kind of moment. I remember seeing random YouTube comments or tweets where someone's like, XRP to $50 or $100, get ready. And usually I just roll my eyes, right? But here we have a scenario, however theoretical, where $64 actually kind of pops out of a serious analysis. It's the kind of mother of all kind of long shots, but it's a completely made up, it's not a completely made up number, right? It came from actual assumptions and math. Now, before we go any further, I need to hit pause and make one thing absolutely clear. Just because I'm talking about these big numbers does not mean that it's guaranteed to happen or that I'm telling you that it will happen. It's actually far from it. And that leads me to this rather important disclaimer that I have to share. Now this might just shock you, but I'm not a financial advisor, and nothing in this video is financial advice. Cryptocurrencies are highly volatile and you could lose all of the money that you invest. You should always do your own research and consult a qualified professional. After all, your investments are entirely your responsibility, and you should know that nothing is ever guaranteed when it comes to investing. Neither I, this channel, nor YouTube are liable for any losses. And this video today is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Alright, I'm glad that we kind of got that out of the way. I know that was a kind of mouthful, but it's rather important. So, you might be thinking to yourselves, okay, we've got some pie-in-the-sky numbers on the board. How realistic is any of this? Well, let's analyze it. Right, the crux of these scenarios is the XRPL is capturing a 10% share of a gigantic market. Now that is the kind of part that we need to really think about here, because if that doesn't happen, well, none of these price targets happen either, right? Now currently the XRPL is at about 1% of the tokenized asset pie. To go from 1% to 10% while the pie itself grows from 26 billion to 19 trillion, well, that's a monumental leap. We're talking XRPL's slice growing by tens of thousands of percent, which it would require XRPL to massively, and I mean massively, outperform many other networks in attracting big asset tokenization projects. Now, could it happen? Possibly. One thing in XRPL's favor is that it has a rising tide that lifts all boats. So if the whole tokenization market explodes to $19 trillion, then there might be multiple winners here, not just one chain to rule them all. Even 10% could be feasible if, let's say, Ethereum takes 50%, and some others maybe take 30 to 40%, and XRPL snags around 10%. It still means being one of the rather top players here. So what would it actually take for XRPL to get that 10% then? Well, I think it would require a combination of technology, partnerships, and maybe a little bit of luck. Now, technologically speaking here, XRPL is capable, as we've kind of discussed. It's fast, it's cheap, it's built-in token support, right? But it also needs adoption. Now, Ripple, the company, is likely the key here, right? Because they have to kind of woo big institutions to use the XRPL for tokenization. Now, we might see things like central banks issuing digital currencies on the XRPL, or major financial institutions launching tokenized funds or securities on the XRPL. But, if, for example, a big stock exchange or even a huge real estate trust chose the XRPL as their platform for tokenizing stocks or properties, well, that could bring tens of billions of dollars alone. So there's also the regulatory angle here. Like the XRPL's close association with the company Ripple could either help it or hurt it. On one hand, regulators might prefer platforms, that have identifiable companies, ensuring things, like compliance and so forth. Now, the XRPL has features and sidechains that support KYC, AML if required. And on the other hand, if regulators remain skeptical of XRP because of past legal issues or the SEC lawsuit, right, that could scare some players away. Let's assume by 2033, though, that the legal status is crystal clear and the XRP has just seen another established digital asset, right? Now, consider the competition. Ethereum, with its huge ecosystem, is the obvious heavyweight here, right? It's already home to some of the most exciting tokenized assets and stablecoins. There are also others like Solana or Polkadot, maybe even Avalanche and other specialized chains. Right? Even new contenders that we don't know yet could emerge by 2033. So XRPL will have to offer something compelling, at least compelling enough that issuers choose it over the alternatives. Now, one edge could be the cost and reliability, right? If you're tokenizing, say, real estate, and you want people trading those tokens, then doing that on Ethereum might subject them to unpredictable fees and network congestion. On the XRPL, transactions cost a tiny fraction of a penny and settle in 3 to 5 seconds. Now that user experience is rather a big deal, especially for high volume or low value transactions. Now let me give you a bit of a hypothetical, right? Suppose a country decides to put its land registry on a blockchain, turning land titles into tokens, and they'll kind of want citizens to be able to transfer ownership easily. Well, XRPL could be a great choice for that because of its speed and its low cost, and because you can issue tokens without worrying about smart contract bugs messing things up. Now, if something like that happened in a few different places, XRPL's share of that $19 trillion could climb pretty quickly. Another example is stablecoins or even central bank digital currencies on the XRPL. Now, we already have some USD stablecoins on the XRP ledger. If one of them really kind of took off, or if, let's say, a digital euro or digital yen was launched on the XRPL, that could be a huge chunk of value right there, potentially hundreds of billions of dollars in circulation. Now, even with all of that, $1.9 trillion on the XRPL is a lot. It might be that the tokenization market will end up rather fragmented, with dozens of different platforms sharing that $19 trillion. And in that case, maybe the XRPL only gets 5% or 2% instead of the full 10%. And that would, of course, make XRP's price outcome proportionately lower, like instead of $32, maybe $6 or $3 in those scenarios. Still, $6 would be nearly double of XRP's price right now, so it's nothing to sneeze at. And I remember that $64 figure that we mentioned earlier, with a kind of speculative premium that goes on top. Well, that basically assumes a hyper cycle where people kind of bid up kind of XRP beyond kind of the raw fundamentals, and would actually suggest. Now, crypto kind of markets here are known for doing just that. They overshoot to the upside and then often crash back to the downside. Now, if XRP really were central to a multi-trillion-dollar asset network, I wouldn't be surprised if during kind of some mania phase, it did shoot up well past the fair value for a little while. That's kind of where it could see prices like $64 and then maybe even a correction afterwards. Now, as an XRP holder myself, I'd love nothing more than to see these really high numbers. It's kind of like the thing that keeps us all dreaming, right? But we also have to kind of temper that with some reality. Now, my personal strategy here is that we don't want to rely on $64 actually happening. That would be gravy, of course, but that's not what we're here for, really, right? I'm going to be more focused on the steady growth and the real adoption, right? If we get a miracle scenario like this, hey, I'll take it. I might even kind of throw a party on the Discord server if XRP hits $10, let alone $64, right? Now, speaking of our Discord, if you haven't joined yet, you should definitely check it out, right? We have a great community over there, and we chat about all of these stories of crypto topics, etc., right? Including wild scenarios just like this one. It's completely free, it's educational, and a good way to kind of stay sane in this roller coaster of crypto. Now, since we're nearing the end of this little adventure, I'm going to drop this right here. If you are looking for a place to trade or accumulate XRP or any other cryptocurrency, and you need a solid exchange, well, I personally use Kraken Pro. They've been my kind of go-to platform. Now, I do have an affiliate link for Kraken Pro that is in the description down below. If you use it, it helps support the channel here at no cost to yourself. That's totally up to you, of course. I want to be transparent that it is an affiliate link that is in the description that does benefit the channel here if you use it. Whether you use it or not, make sure that you're trading safely out there regardless. Right, let's zoom out and wrap things up here, right? What did we learn from this little thought experiment today? Well, we've learned that under some of the very ambitious conditions, XRP could reach values that sound like fantasy today. But we also saw that those conditions involve massive industry-wide changes, the kind that basically a good chunk of global finance gets tokenized, and the XRPL is a major backbone of that new system. Is it a long shot? Yes, it is. But even if reality falls short, there's a range of different outcomes where XRP could still do very well if the XRPL captures even a fraction of that growth. Now, the idea of real-world assets coming on-chain is not science fiction. It's already happening right now in small doses and is likely to accelerate. The open question is, will the XRPL be at the center of it, or more on the sidelines? Now, personally, I'm excited to watch it all play out. I'll be right here keeping tabs on any development, like big partnerships or tech updates that could kind of tip the scales in XRP's direction. And you can bet that I'm going to be sharing those with you as they come up. If nothing else, though, this exercise gave me some perspective. it's easy to get caught up in the daily price charts and forget why a lot of us are actually here. We see the potential for blockchain to transform finance. Sometimes it's good to imagine the end game, even if it's a little bit fantastical, right? And then step back and consider the steps that it would actually take to get there. Who knows? Maybe 2033 we'll all look back at this video and either laugh at how optimistic we all were, or be amazed at how close we actually got. Either way, it's going to be a fascinating one to see. Now, I'm really curious what you guys think. Is 10% of $19 trillion market an attainable goal for the XRP ledger? Or is it just too optimistic? You can let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, or you can hop into our free Discord and let us talk about it there. I love hearing from different perspectives and maybe see, something that I don't, right? Or maybe you're even more bullish on that scenario. Anyway, thanks for hanging out with me today on this speculative journey. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I'll catch you all in the next one.